Won't you come and meet me at the movies? Won't you come and watch a flick with me? Famous scenes with drama queens and heroes acting out there on a silver screen. Come grab a seat, the popcorn is on me.
Camera speed.
Sound production, take one.
Hi there, and welcome into Meet Me the Movies. This is Thomas Manning. I'm riding solo today without my co-host Noel Manning, but we have a great interview for you here talking with Jay Duplass. He's an indie filmmaking legend, and he is director of the new film Baltimoreans, which we get into in this conversation. You may know Jay as one half of the Duplass brothers, along with his brother Mark, but The Baltimoreans is actually Jay's first film that he has directed solo. And so this is kind of a really interesting point in his career where he's going in a bit of a different direction than he has for the first, I guess, 20 years or so of his career. And so we have a really great discussion here, and I can't thank Jay enough for his time and hope you all enjoy the conversation. And without further ado, I'll turn it over to my conversation with Jay Duplass talking about the Baltimoreans. All right. Well, Jay, it's great to meet you. I really appreciate your time, and it's great to be chatting with you.
Thanks, man. Great to be here. Thanks for supporting the movie.
Yeah, you got it. And I'll head right into it. I know this is your first feature film that you've directed since 2012, I believe. And
Yeah.
obviously, you've been writing, producing, and acting in a lot of other projects during that time. But I think you've talked about the variety of circumstances that came together for you to finally return to the director's chair, and especially coming out of the strikes. And then you found Michael Strassner. So I'll ask to you, what stood out to you about Michael and just Michael as an artist that clicked for you and made you say, that's who I want to work with in my first feature film in over a decade, or as a director.
Well, Michael Strassner first started prancing across my Instagram screens during the pandemic. I had focused my viewership entirely on comedy. I was like, anything that's not comedy, mute, block, unfollow, whatever. I was like, I need to laugh. I need to have fun. And, he's got such great personal content, and he's obviously a sketch comedian and really good at putting himself out there. But the more I watched, I was like, this is an incredibly sensitive, sweet, vulnerable guy in the body of basically like a 1978 Chicago Bears linebacker. You know what I mean? It was just such a weird juxtaposition of him just being such a total sweetheart, but also being able to like lift a small car and throw it across a football field kind of vibe. Um, so I just followed him, and he ended up DMing me. And long story short, I was at the tail end of, you know, haven't had made a movie in forever, and realizing that if I was going to do it, it needed to happen as soon as possible. And that, because I hadn't made a movie in so long, Hollywood is very much not what have you done, but what have you done lately. And I had never directed a movie without my brother. And we had both kind of figured out that he wasn't interested in that anymore. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. Like, I was just having trouble getting traction. So I just needed to make a small movie that couldn't be stopped, which was essentially going back to the origins of my career when I, made the Puffy Chair in 2005. And, um, it was an available materials movie. I had a brother, he had a girlfriend, I had a friend, he had a touring van. We had this small town where his girlfriend Katie was from that would let us shoot there. And we were just like, how can we back a movie into what is available to us? And similar to me, I was like, how can I back a movie into somebody's life? And Michael Strassner at the time was it. He was, to me, a movie star who just wasn't famous yet, very unexpressed, very in the same position of me, like really dying to do something that mattered. And turns out he was from Baltimore, and one of his best friends, Dave Bonnet, who's our producer, the location manager and producer there. And we asked him, is like, what is it? Is it expensive to shoot on the street there? He's like, no, I can get us a permit. to shoot for a month in Baltimore on the streets for $45. And I was like, $45 a day, that's a great deal. And he was like, no, $45 total. And I was like, oh, that's what we're doing. And 2 weeks after the strikes ended, we were on the ground in Baltimore, um, shooting a tiny movie with, 15 people in freezing cold weather.
Yeah, and you really get to explore the city of Baltimore from a cinematic perspective in this film. And I'm sure for you, that gave you an opportunity to see it through a different light than maybe you'd seen it before. So I'm curious for you, throughout the filmmaking process here, how did that maybe expand what you knew about the city or deepen anything that you already had in mind about Baltimore?
I knew nothing about Baltimore except from The Wire. And, I mean, really, it was just, um, I, um, I had been there a couple of times for film festivals back in the day when I was making movies. But you rarely get to see the city when you do that. You're mostly just kind of like going to screenings and doing panels and stuff like that. So I knew that it was like a bit of a sister city to New Orleans, which is where I grew up. It's just like there's a lot of soul there. It's like a black city primarily. It's there's like a ton of magic there. And I think that quality of Baltimore, it just felt like there was like some hidden magic right around the corner always. And that felt really fitting for our movie. I mean, even the look of our movie is like we're shooting on the streets in some rough neighborhoods in Baltimore, and it's dark, and there's not a lot of light back there, but there's often these like twinkly lights in the background. They're just like there's magic somewhere. Just keep looking, and that's kind of what the movie's about, is trying to make lemonade out of lemons because these guys are stranded on Christmas Eve. And it looks like they're about to have the worst Christmas ever, and they're just fighting to try and make something special out of it. So it was super cool. I fell in love with Baltimore and the people there. Our crew was amazing. It was just, and I think for them it was really special because I think Baltimore has been shot for other cities, but since The Wire, there really hasn't been much representation for Baltimore itself. So um, yeah, it's been super cool, and the people from Baltimore have seen it. Seem Seems like we did them proud because there's definitely a lot of magic in the movie that is attributed directly to Baltimore.
Right, absolutely. And in the cold open of this film, I think it's a brave choice to open with such a dark scene, but also just have just a tinge of situational comedy in that moment. And
Sure.
I think this shows, immense trust in the audience. So for you,
Thank you.
how important was it for you to put all your cards on the table from the jump like that and just, set the tone just right from the very opening scene?
Honestly, the way that the script was is we had started with a sketch comedy scene that leads to the suicide attempt. But we started shooting on the first day. We weren't shooting that scene, we were shooting something else. And I just had this feeling. I was like, we need to cut out the first 7 pages of the movie and just start with this suicide attempt and let that be a mystery that we unfold as we go. And it definitely was scary to do it. And I knew we had to find some comedy in it because it's an attempt that fails. Spoiler alert. Um, uh, and you know, um, Michael is just when I first started to get to know him, he started telling me about his origin story, and when he told me that how he got sober is he tried to kill himself, and the only reason he's alive is because the belt broke because he was holding a little too much holiday weight. And I giggled, and he was like, "It's okay to laugh." He's like, "I want you to laugh." I knew in my mind, I was like, "That is an incredible scene." Um, and I think the next really significant thing that he said was, he said, "I got sober and I just didn't think I'd ever be funny again," because he was very much like a Chris Farley style comedian, a lot of physical humor, a lot of big, boisterous screaming and yelling. And he said when he went into the rooms of recovery, he started just telling stories about his life, and people started laughing. And then that's when he realized, like, oh, I'm inherently funny. It doesn't require alcohol or drugs. And, he'll be the first person to tell you that he feels like he's gotten only funnier since he, has become sober. So those two nuggets just made me realize, man, this guy is uh is is a movie star, comedy star,
Yeah, definitely. And Michael and Olivia Lucardi, they play a couple in this film, but they don't
Yeah.
really spend a lot of time together for various reasons. But in one of their scenes early in the movie, we have this tension between them, and it's not necessarily an argument, but it's kind of the audience's first introduction to some of the conflict that's there within their relationship. And so I'm curious for you, in developing that scene, what were some small details of putting that together that you knew had to be right in order to, subtly communicate to the viewer that we're going to be exploring this relationship throughout the whole film, but in, indirect ways.
Yeah, I mean, it was important that this, you know, engaged couple had that they loved each other and that they had, you know, hopes and dreams, shared hopes and dreams, and that was important, but also that maybe some things weren't quite right, and I always felt like the nugget of that relationship was that, she was probably very instrumental in helping him get sober and being at his side while he was getting sober. And, she says in that opening scene, no more alcohol, no more comedy. She's nervous about the fact that his best friend wants him to do a comedy show, and she doesn't want him to do it. Um, and, you know, I also didn't want her to be the bad guy, like I think it's pretty clear the way she says no comedy, no alcohol, no comedy. Those were his words, you know. And I think that was something that he declared back when he got sober and he basically gave up alcohol, and in his mind he gave up comedy because why I'm not going to do comedy if I'm not drunk because I've never done that, you know. I don't think I'll be funny without it, so let's just and that comedy world certainly encourages you to drink to get your liquid courage going, so yeah, I think it's weirdly holds the nuggets of tension and conflict not only for their relationship but for him, for Michael's character Cliff, is no alcohol, no comedy, and I think the big revelation in the movie after like the sort of pivot scene of the film when he finally goes on stage sober for the first time is he realizes he can go on stage and not drink and it might even be better than before. So yeah, you definitely identified like, yeah, those are two of the biggest seeds of the film.
We are here on Meet Me in the Movies talking with Jay Duplass, director of The Baltimoreans. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back here on Meet Me in the Movies.
Won't you come and meet me at the movies? Won't you come and watch a flick?
Join us this October for Cleveland Community College Foundation's 5th Annual Yetis Athletics Golf Tournament. Your support funds student athletes, helping them succeed every step of the way. Play with purpose. Tee off for student success. Visit cccyetis.com to register today.
As Cleveland County's premier event facility, LeGrand Center is the ideal location for any event. The LeGrand Center is located 45 minutes west of Charlotte, 45 minutes north of Spartanburg, and just a little over an hour east of Asheville. Whether you're a small business looking for a place for an off-site meeting or a bride looking for that special location for her wedding, LeGrand Center is the perfect place for you.
Won't you come and meet me at the movies? Won't you come and watch a flick?
All right, welcome back into Meet Me in the Movies. We are talking with indie filmmaking legend Jay Duplass, director of The Baltimoreans. Let's get right back into the conversation. And within the relationship between Michael and Olivia's characters, there's this sense of maintaining mutual respect between them, even though their relationship was falling apart. And I feel like
Yeah.
that's something that we don't often see represented in movies with troubled relationships. And
Yeah.
that strikes me something that's important to you as a storyteller, even going back to the puffy chair, where something similar there. So, how has your exploration of that idea evolved over the years for you, creatively and personally?
Yeah, that's a good question. That might be something that's just spilling out of me in terms of how I try to operate in my life, is just really just because something's about to change in your relationship doesn't mean you don't love that person and don't want the best for that person. I think there's a ton of love between, Cliff and his fiance, and I wanted to maintain it, I guess. I think they both know that they only want the best for each other. It's just whether or not it will work out together. But it's maybe akin to the long-winded process of me essentially, breaking up with my brother as a writer-director team. Because all I wanted to do was to be the Coen Brothers 2.0 with my brother after I saw Raising Arizona in 1987. And we got to do that for a good chunk of time. We did it in a lot of ways. We were in bands together, and we failed as filmmakers together, and then we made 5 feature films together between 2005 and 2011. But I think Mark became a famous actor, and got really into producing, and it took us a really long time to figure out that um, he wasn't that interested in directing movies, and that is still my number one thing that I want to do. And the thing about directing movies is it doesn't fall in your lap. Nobody's knocking on your door to direct their movie, uh, uh, and pay you well. You know what I mean? Like my friend Miguel Arteta, a great filmmaker, is always saying, everybody and everything is trying to stop you from making your original movie. And so I think it's like it's not that Mark doesn't want to direct movies. It's just in order to direct a movie, you have to really um, supplicate yourself to that process. And when that movie's ready to be made, you need to jump immediately. And that's just not something you can do if you're on a big TV show or whatever it is. If you're a busy actor, it's very, very difficult to do. So it took us a really long time to realize that about ourselves, to realize that that is okay, to uncouple in that way, to tell the Directors Guild of America we're no longer directing together. And they're like, well, you'll never direct together ever again if you break up. They're very strict about those policies. And and for me to develop an idea that I felt strong enough about and comfortable about enough to develop my skills as a writer director without Mark, to overcome my fears about, you know, am I going to suck without him? Am I going to make a movie and it sucks and people are going to say, oh, Mark was the special sauce? Like that's scary. That is some scary, scary stuff, and it was not easy for me to get traction to make a movie. Hollywood, people always say it's not what have you done, but what have you done lately, and I was trying to make a movie without my brother and I was unproven in that way. So ultimately the Baltimoreans was just a way to go back to my roots and just make a movie that I could pay for. And luckily my brother supported me in that as a producer, which is cool because we're still doing it together. It's just different arrangement. And
I just really like you.
yeah, I think long story short is like that's kind of how I go about my relationships is like if I love somebody, I love somebody and trust them and want what's best for them. And doesn't always mean that we're gonna continue arm in arm, you know.
Well, for what it's worth, I don't think you suck as a solo director. I actually think you're really good at it. So, you
Thank
know,
you. I appreciate it. That's really nice of you to say. I'll take it. It feels good to hear it because it's still scary.
Yeah, I know it is. I know it is. And with the character of Dee Dee in this film, played by Liz Larson,
Yeah.
her and Cliff become intertwined. And initially, she's the hesitant one, and then Cliff is enthusiastic about roping her along into this adventure. But then she comes around and she's gung ho about it. When at that point he's ready to call it a night. So
Yeah.
I kind of love those the tug and pull rhythm there. So I'm curious
Thanks.
for you about developing just that dynamic and having them kind of go up and down and ebb and flow with each other, and just what that brought out of you as a storyteller.
Yeah. I mean, I think I always knew at the core that on this night, she was going to have to do the scariest thing in the world to her, and he was going to have to do the scariest thing in the world for him. And I think as I was making the film and writing drafts and shooting it, I started to realize more and more that they each needed to be instrumental in helping each other survive those things. So he helps her, she's very closed to him at first, but when they go to her ex-husband's house so that she can see her grandkid and her kid on Christmas Eve, he's holding a Christmas celebration slash wedding celebration to his new younger wife. And she sees Cliff operate in that environment and use all of the humor and boisterousness and absurdity that was kind of annoying her to sort of put her ex-husband in his place in a way that he can't even mentally comprehend, you know, and win the day for her. It really flips a switch for her. And then, it's his sketch improv abilities that allowed him to do that. And suddenly she's like, wow, that's a superpower. That level of humor, that level of imagination, that level of tightrope walking, and so she says, I want more of this. Let's go to a comedy show. And, he's ready to shut the night down. She doesn't know. He's trying to play it off like he's tired. She doesn't know that's the scariest thing for him is not only going on stage potentially sober, but just going back into that world that, he was jettisoned from, that world that got him in a position where he somehow was like ready to end it all. So I think those two scenes as a pair, I think I always knew were going to be like the juggernauts of the movie, and that um, the improv scene we actually ended up reshooting because I needed to make her even more instrumental in taking risks that allowed him to really be himself on stage, probably for the first time in his life.
Yeah, I mean, I could ask a dozen questions about that improv scene alone, but generally, I'm curious about the meta act of creating an improv sequence within a fictional narrative film. You know,
Most complicated sequence I've
yeah,
ever made in my life,
yeah,
100%.
yeah.
I mean,
So,
I've shot like crazy sequences on bridges with kids jumping in the water and all that. This narratively was absolutely the most complicated thing. And when we were shooting it, I was like, this is good, but it's not great, and something's missing. And if we had not rewritten it and reshot it, I think the movie would not be the sort of like hit that it is, at least on the festival circuit. It would have been really good, but I don't think it would have been great. Because, you know, there were so many things that had to go into consideration. His reluctance to go on stage, being pulled on stage, people being unwilling to join him on stage, Dee taking the risk to do it, them failing and floundering, and then it becoming something other than what he thought it would be. And then yes and saying yes and to that, her learning how to yes and, them getting laughs, having a huge breakthrough, uh, you know, exploring some of their burgeoning romantic connection behind the guise of their characters on stage, little Bill Shakespeare action there, and the ending, which is a hard down twist that triggers his fear of, relapsing as an alcoholic. So, I mean, dude, it's like a microcosm for the whole movie. And that scene was rewritten in editorial over the course of like 5 months. Of what we actually ended up doing is rewriting it and rewriting it and re-editing it, and actually like using what we ended up doing is like using footage where their mouths weren't moving and recording audio and putting it in, and we kept reworking it until we got close enough to where, oh, this is the scene that it needs to be. And then I finally went back and rewrote the whole script, and then we went back to Baltimore in the middle of the summer, 98-degree weather, and reshot the hardest scene that we had to shoot over the course of 2 days in sweltering heat. But it was so freaking worth it because I could tell when we were shooting, I'm like, oh, this is it. We got it.
Yeah, and then after that scene, Cliff has that conversation with Dee Dee where he basically says, up there on that stage, he realized that that's what he was made for. So I'm curious for you, did you have a similar moment at all in your life with filmmaking where you realized there was something that happened and it's like, okay, this is what I want to be doing, or was it kind of just
A
a
hundred
series of,
percent.
yeah, yeah. What
A
is
hundred
that?
percent. I was trying to be the Coen brothers. What I had to offer was the almost opposite stylistically from the Coen brothers. It's almost like a documentary realism is what I was working with, especially in the early days. And, you know, failed making movies all in my 20s. And right when I was about to turn 30, I was ready to throw in the towel. And my brother said, we're making a movie today. And I was like, what are you talking about? We don't have a film camera. This is back in those days, And he's like, we'll use mom and dad's home video camera. Come up with an idea. I'm going to buy a tape at the corner store. And when I come back, we're rolling. And I came up with a story about myself, about trying to perfect the personal greeting of my answering machine and failing to do so and having a nervous breakdown. That was a $3 movie that changed everything for me because it went to Sundance and it got written up in a ton of journals and we got an agent and a lawyer out of it, and now I know what I'm supposed to do is make fun of myself on screen.
Yeah, well, I'm not even kidding. This morning, I was doing the same thing in my office phone, working on setting up my voicemail, and I was like, "This is just like This Is John. This feels
Man,
very, very familiar."
you're not alone,
So,
dude. You're not alone.
yeah. Oh man. Well, I know we're running out of time here, but Jay, I can't thank you enough for your time today. I really appreciate you and appreciate your film and everything you've done for indie filmmaking. And actually,
Thanks, man.
I'm going to be seeing you at the Nashville Film Fest in a few weeks as well. So
Yes,
hopefully, I'll get a chance to shake your hand then.
that'd be great. Love to meet you in person. Thanks for supporting the movie, and everybody go see the Baltimoreans in movie theaters September 12th.
Well, thank you so much again to Jay Duplass for sharing his time with us here on Meet Me in the Movies, talking about The Baltimoreans, which is in theaters nationwide on September 12th. Thanks to the folks at IFC Films for setting up this interview, and hope you all check out The Baltimoreans, and thank you for sharing your time with us here on Meet Me in the Movies. For Noel T. Manning and Thomas Manning, that's me. That's a wrap.
We meet again.